Water. Earth. Fire. Air.
Some people think that Morgan Freeman is the king of narration, but we all know it's Katara. Who knew that 4 simple words could embed themselves into the minds and imaginations of a whole generation? Calling Avatar: The Last Airbender a kids show almost feels wrong, as it's a compelling, thought-provoking and profound experience that even adults can enjoy. It's an objectively good show thanks to its core message, unique lore and relatable characters. But the fact that it's designed for kids is part of what makes it so amazing. It's something that you grew up watching and can share with your children, passing the show down like a family heirloom, meaning it can live forever. It almost makes me wish I could have children just to share it with. But, you know, puppet and all. The Last Airbender, or Legend of Aang if you're so inclined, is one of TV's most unique and special shows. So, let's talk about each and every episode to discuss why it's such a sublime series. And remember, these are my thoughts, so if yours are different, feel free to share them. No opinion is wrong. Except for liking the live action film. I don't even have a heart, but I know that liking that movie makes you heartless. Plus, spoilers. They come in. Oh boy, they come in. When it comes to the humble beginnings of a show, it's normally quite tough to get it right. That isn't entirely the case with Avatar, but it's not the case. If ever there were a perfect example of a you need to sit through the first season before it gets really good, it's this. The Boy in the Iceberg is a solid opener that introduces you to the world and characters well. The now iconic opening narration from Katara sets up the world instantly, and while you still feel like a stranger in it, it's very welcoming thanks to its simplicity. The episode shows as 2 Water Tribe youngsters accidentally awaken a relic of the past in the Avatar after they thaw him out of an iceberg. But nearby is the banished Prince Zuko, who's on a mission to catch him. There's a great setup between the heroes and villains in this one. You've got the bickering Katara and Sokka, who capture your hearts with goofy humour and that relatable sister-brother dynamic. Then the angsty Zuko and his lovable uncle. Zuko is particularly on point in this intro, as he's instantly got you asking questions. Why is he banished? How did he get that scar? And who on earth styled his hair like that? To be fair, we never really get an answer on that one. Then, of course, you've got the introduction of Aang, the lovable and goofy little kid who'll act as our lead. It's easy to fall for him quickly, and you'd be heartless not to. This episode doesn't do too much outside of introductions, but they do get them off to a good start. 8 out of 10. After a warm, or let's be honest, cold opening to the show, it's time to start kicking off the action, and that comes in this episode as Zuko launches an attack on the Southern Water Tribe and takes Aang hostage. Now, this episode really does introduce one of the show's best aspects, and that's the sense of balance. It plays with some rather dark concepts, but makes them feel light-hearted thanks to the humour. For example, when Zuko comes down on the tribe to find Aang and Sokka fights tooth and nail to take him out. The goofy animation, sound effects and Sokka's instant defeat make even this somewhat dramatic moment seem silly. It's quite tough to get Imperial invasions to get a laugh, so I guess the show deserves props for that. After being captured by Zuko, Aang proves why being the last of your people can have its benefits, as he easily defeats the guards who've never fought an airbender before and begins to make his escape. Of course, you can't quite easily escape a self-conscious, angsty teen with body issues, drives and an institutionalised inferiority complex brought on by the abuse of his father and pressure of being a banished crown prince to a country that has declared war on the world. Children's TV. You gotta love it. The episode hangs its boots up by seeing Katara and Sokka come to the rescue and an epic display of Aang's avatar state. It kicks it up a notch from the first episode and sets the heroes off on their journey. Hooray! Plus, this is the episode where we get to see the fuzzy boy Appa fly for the first time. So, get some points for that. 8.3 out of 10. Now, when watching the show for the first time, plenty of eagle-eyed people might have heard reference that Aang was the last airbender. Personally, I missed it. I mean, where does the show tell you that? Thanks to his being the last of his people, travelling back to his home is going to be anything but wholesome, and that's what this one gives you. This episode acts as a great way to ease the audience into the tragedy of this world, as it's dark and emotional, but doesn't go overboard. It also makes it clear that the Avatar state, as introduced in the last episode, isn't something Aang can control. The episode follows the newly formed Team Avatar as they travel to the Southern Air Temple, Shocker, and learn about the Avatar cycle and Aang's ancestry. On the Zuko side of the coin, you meet the intimidating Commander Zhao, and even see he and Zuko compete in an Agni Kai, which is essentially a firebending duel. It's a great moment for seeing the more human side of Zuko, and has some thrilling action. While the series is far from reaching the heights of its dramatic storytelling here, this is still a poignant episode that establishes some fantastic development for Aang. Seeing his blissful ignorance and innocence as he wonders where the air nomads are before being crushed when finding out they're all gone reminds you just how young he is and the scale of his responsibilities and trauma. On a lighter note, you also get to meet the smaller fluffy boy Momo in this one, who's great, but not as cool as Appa. Hashtag Team Appa. 8.4 out of 10. Look, it's a kids show from the mid-2000s. Of course there was gonna be a girls stink episode, but as far as gender-based children's show outings go, this one's pretty good. The episode follows Team Avatar as they make it to Kyoshi Island, a village founded by and based around a former Avatar called Kyoshi, who we really need to see in a spin-off show because she's badder than a rock slide and cooler than an avalanche. The outing shows as they meet with the Kyoshi Warriors, a unit of all-female fighters who royally kick butt. Sokka ends up learning a lesson about how tough and strong girls can be, Aang messes around on a giant fish named after a salmon skin roll, and Zuko destroys yet another town. One of the best things about this episode are the Kyoshi Warriors themselves. Besides from the awesome girl power they inspire, they're also a great piece of world building as they act as a perfect example of the cultural significance of the Avatar. In a world so reliant on the elements, of course people are going to idolise and form cultures around the people who control all of them. So, seeing a whole island and fighting force dedicated to Avatar Kyoshi just seems right. The only downside to this episode is that you get more of the same with Zuko, as he still feels like an angry, shallow villain. We started to see a more complex side of him in the last chapter, but here, he once again reverts back to hunting down the Avatar, and we learn precious little about why he's so driven. Thankfully, it won't take long for that to change. 8.3 out of 10. Hey, it's time to visit a city, and it's a pretty great one. The King of Omashu is an interesting episode as it sets up the world of earthbending cities and introduces you to one of the show's zaniest characters. I'm obviously talking about the Cabbage Merchant. This one shows Team Avatar venturing to the titular Omashu and running afoul of the king. He sets up a collection of tasks for Aang to complete and puts Sokka and Katara in mortal danger as a motive. It's an engaging episode where Aang is taught to look at things from a different perspective and ends in the touching reveal that the King of Omashu was in fact Aang's childhood friend Bumi. Bumi himself is an absolute delight, as the wild ruler of the city has bucket loads of kooky energy, yet a really strong sense of wisdom. So, overall, the episode's a lot of fun, and it's got some good humour in it. But it mostly feels inconsequential, as while Aang learns an interesting lesson, we don't really get much outside of the puzzles and fights. Plus, there is absolutely no focus on a Zuko subplot, so if you don't enjoy the main story here, then you're bang out of luck. Although, it is home to one of the greatest aliases the show has ever used. Pippin Padsucapulabla. I'll just let Aang take it away.
Pippin Pedalopsicopoulos the third!
In the end, this one gets a 7.9 out of 10. When you step back and think about it, Earthbenders seem like they'd be unbeatable, cause how are you gonna defend yourself against someone who can literally move the very ground you stand on? Well, Turns out the Fire Nation had a pretty decent solution to that trick. Imprisoned shows as Team Avatar arrive at a town that's under strict control from the Fire Nation. The main rule enforced here is that earthbending is banned, and thus when the crew meet a young earthbender called Haru, it causes them to feel for his struggle. He invites them back to his place and... Okay, look, I'm so sorry, but I've always wanted to do this. He protect, he attack, but most importantly, he munch on haystack. Nice! Anyway, after Haru gets arrested for earthbending, Katara sneaks onto a metal prison where they're keeping the benders and plans a revolt. Overall, this episode is fine. It's quite bland because it all centres on the somewhat dull character of Haru, and the actual prison break itself is nowhere near as exciting as it sounds. It's also particularly disappointing because it feels like a bit of a waste of George Takei, who could have made a really good cameo in the show, but Sulu was wasted on this one. 7.8 out of 10. Now, normally with the two-parters I'd package them into one full entry, but here I'm not going to do that, because these episodes feel like totally separate pieces conjoined by the theme of the winter solstice. They're essentially episodic, so I'll treat them as such. This initial outing details the events of Team Avatar's visit to a small community that's being ravaged by a spirit and is surrounded by a completely desecrated forest. To help the villagers, Aang ventures into the spirit world, where he encounters Avatar Roku's dragon, who informs him of a way to speak to Roku himself. In the end, he ends up managing to save the village by bonding with the angry spirit of the forest called Heibai and squashing his beef. If that wasn't enough, there's also a brilliant subplot which sees Uncle Iroh captured by a group of earthbending soldiers. One of the show's biggest themes is environmentalism. While other projects like Captain Planet have done that before, it's way more subtle in this series. The idea of Aang's connection to the world, how humans abuse it and the anger it throws back at us is told through some great symbolism in Heibai, the spirit that literally attacks a town that it blames for the destruction of nature. But in the end, everything is solved through understanding, communication and peace. It's also important to discuss the Iroh Zuko subplot here, as we can finally talk about how friggin' awesome Iroh is. Seeing him navigate the wiles of being kidnapped and even teaming up with Zuko to combat his captors is one of the first times you get to see how powerful he is, behind all the jokes and tea drinking. It was also a great way to show that you can root for characters from the Fire Nation, and foreshadowed the eventual turn from both Iroh and Zuko. 8.2 out of 10. Moving on from part 1 to part 2 now comes an episode that gives a great many revelations, some strong world building, and kicks off the drive of the series. This one tells the tale of Team Avatar's excavation into the Fire Nation, as they seek out the Sage Temple on Crescent Island. When they get there, Aang speaks with his past self Roku, who informs him that he must defeat the Fire Lord before Sozin's comet arrives, which gives him less than a year to master every element. Makes workplace deadlines seem like a walk in the park. There is a lot to love about this episode. One of the most exciting things about it is the terrifying premise of Team Avatar entering the Fire Nation. Seeing our heroes struggle against the tides of the Fire Navy and the danger that lurks around every corner makes you feel as nervous as someone with a peanut allergy at M&M World. The opening scene alone is an incredible action sequence with Appa flying through projectiles and fire blasts. It was pulse-pounding. Then, you moved on to some grand ideas, like Aang being able to speak to past avatars, the avatar state itself, and the introduction of Sozin's comet. You really get the best of both worlds in this one. It's a solid episode, and started to thread the idea that this show was something special. The highest score of this video, 8.8 out of 10. You know what? This show has been pretty great thus far, but what it really needs is pirates. I don't know who came up with this idea, but they deserve a pay rise. This outing might not be to everyone's taste, but it's a fun little detour from the severity of the last two. This gives you a great outing to act as a breather from the plot-heavy previous chapters. It shows as Katara becomes frustrated with Aang's natural waterbending abilities and seeks to improve her own. She does so by stealing a waterbending scroll for some pirates after they try to charge her more than the cost of a London flat for it. This, of course, puts a target on their back. Or a black spot, if you will. Alongside this, Iroh and Zuko have their own run-in with the sea-dwelling fiends as Iroh searches the markets for a white lotus pie showpiece. Ooh, cheeky bit of foreshadowing! And they join forces to obtain the Avatar. The episode does very little outside of giving you a fun time. It's got a cabbage merchant joke, some fun characters, and the introduction of a mysterious, ruby-eyed monkey which appears often in the show. Seriously, what is up with that thing? But besides from that, it's not got much going for it. The jealous conflict between Katara and Aang is interesting as it shows a slightly darker side to her and reveals Aang's skills, but other than that, the characters are essentially on autopilot for this one. You can love the pirates and the laughs, but you won't miss too much if you skip this one out. 7.8 out of 10. It's disappointing to have to end on a low point, which is actually what the person who made me said after finishing my hair. It's not that this episode is bad, as there's a lot of fun to be had with it, but it's not very unique and relies heavily on a character that very few people found interesting. Jet takes place after Sokka, Aang and Katara cross paths with a group of freedom fighters. Sokka doesn't trust them, Katara is a little smitten with their leader, and Aang kinda just takes a back seat in this one. The episode tries to spell out a big mystery with the gang's leader Jet, but it's quite clear from the get-go that he isn't the Robin Hood figure he acts like, and this comes true when he's revealed to have some very dangerous plans in mind, like destroying a town full of civilians just to wipe the Fire Nation away. This mature idea was interesting, but as already stated, Jet's heel turn was very predictable. Plus, he didn't work too well as a character. You were clearly supposed to fall for his cool vigilante antics, just like Katara, but his conflict with Sokka made him unlikable from the get-go. The freedom fighters themselves also felt distinctly unoriginal, even down to having a large person ironically called Pipsqueak. A joke we've never heard before. Jet, as a character, does get to do more interesting stuff later on, but it's safe to say he doesn't make the best first impression here. Sadly, our lowest of the video, 7.4 out of 10. And thus concludes the first half of the first season, and overall it's probably the weakest. That isn't to say that it's bad, just that we don't get to see the show's true glory yet. It's mostly set up, and that makes sense as this is such a unique world, so it needs to be broken in slowly. Still, it causes these initial outings to drag as the pacing gets rather slow. It has all the building blocks there, but just doesn't capitalise on them yet. Anyway, that's it for Book 1 Part 1. I'll be back at this again the week after next, so for now, thanks for watching. I'm gonna make like Aang now and disappear. But only for a week, not for 100 years. Although, if I froze myself, maybe I'd wake up in a world where I could get this weird hand removed from me. A boy can dream. Peace.